When I watch a movie, one of the things that I like to see in that movie is character development. Sometimes some of the greatest movies are the ones where the whole plot, you see this guy that's a good guy, and then at the end, he actually turns out to be a bad guy. You discover more things about people, and you see their characters really show. We're at a point in the book of Genesis where we were introduced to Rachel in the prior chapter. Rachel was portrayed as beautiful, basically the prized wife, which she is. However, there's a lot said about Rachel in Genesis chapter 29, but we don't really see Rachel's true colors until Genesis 30. So this is a passage that is full of a lot of character development. Rachel's portrayed as this beautiful young woman who goes to the well, meets Jacob there at the well, is this prize wife, runs off to her father. They end up getting married, and really Rachel is a background character, really. We don't really hear a lot about her talking, or she doesn't really share a lot of her values. The writer, Moses of the book of Genesis, only spends time really talking about Rachel in Genesis 30. So after the marriage here, Jacob said to Laban, his uncle, "I'll serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel." He said, okay. After 7 years went by, they had the wedding, and the bride was heavily veiled. And the wedding was at night. He couldn't see. And Uncle Laban was about as honest and straight as a dog's hind leg. He switched him. He said, all right, you labored for Rachel, I'm going to give you my older one, Leah. Heavily veiled, he couldn't see. He just thought it was Rachel. He was mad. Jacob was mad, said, all right, serve me for another 7 years, and you can marry, have her, build it with a wedding ceremony. After that, serve me for another 7 years, and you can have Rachel. He marries Rachel also then, after that week, and then serves him for another 7 years. Already, this is a passage that we're coming into that is extremely relevant in 2023 because their family dynamic is anything but normal, anything but typical. He has 2 wives. He's going to end up having children from both of them, as we're going to see. And the family dynamic is so relatable for today because so many times today, you have families that reflect something along this lines, that are not the just one woman, one husband. These families today can really relate to what's going on in this passage. So with that being said, let's look at it. Genesis chapter 29 in verse 30. So Jacob went into Rachel also. He had them both as wives now. And he loved Rachel more than Leah. I mean, after all, she's the pretty one. She's the one he labored for, right? She's the one he fell in love with. And he served Laban for another 7 years. Verse 31 now. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated means loved less in this passage here, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Reuben. What happens here is Leah conceives 4 sons in this passage. Now, in this passage, we say God's blessing them with children. Yes, he is. But in this culture, there's something special, not just about a woman that can conceive and bear children. However, a woman that can conceive and bear sons was more highly valued in this time than a woman that would bear ladies, because sons could help out on the farm. They didn't have Walmart, right? In this culture, it was more highly valued. So when we read this, we got to understand that it's not just, oh, he's blessing her with children. Oh, he's blessing her. God is blessing Leah, the older one, with 4 sons. 4 in a row. Boom, 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 boom. How do you think Rachel feels about that? Let's look at it. But we see a lot of Leah's heart in here. Leah names her 4 sons all as prayers to God. She names the first Reuben. It means, look, a son. Leah hoped that her husband, Jacob, would love her because she bore him a son. Leah was clinging on to this hope, saying, hey, see this son? Jacob, do you love me? All Leah wants is love from her husband. The second son, Simeon, means to hear, saying, God has heard my prayers, and now, hopefully, my husband will hear and love me. Levi means to attach. That's son number 3. She's saying, oh, now my husband will attach himself to me. Look, I bore 3 sons, 3 in a row. Score right now, Leah 3, Rachel 0. But it's not over. Judah, son number 4, means he will be praised. Leah is certain that God will be praised. So we're seeing a lot of character development right now. Not only are we going to learn a lot about who Rachel is, but we're learning a lot about Leah. Put yourself in Leah's shoes right now. Do you think Leah was part of that plan? Leah was just listening to her dad. And all Leah wants is the love from her husband. And Leah is naming her children as prayers to God. There's some spiritual action going on there. Leah loves God. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Leah is not in the wrong here. Leah's in the right. She just wants love from her husband. She didn't ask to be put in that situation. She didn't. That was not Leah's idea. That was her dad Laban's idea to switch him. Leah was handed a card in life where it's not the family dynamic she thought, but she loved the Lord. And she was bearing sons and craving the affection from her husband. What's wrong with that? Nothing. Leah's doing everything right. All the 4 sons are mentioned, Leah's 4 sons, and their names are given in the rest of chapter 29. Look at Rachel's response. Chapter 30 now. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. Now, what does envy mean? Envy is very closely related to the word jealousy. In fact, every time I looked up the definition of jealousy, envy was used in that definition. It means you're jealous of something somebody else has because you think it should belong to you. And it's talking about contentious. See, the word does not just mean envy and jealous. It means furious. Rachel was furiously jealous. Rachel was hostile. That was not okay with Rachel. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. And she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die." Doesn't really sound like everything's sitting well with her. Rachel becomes furiously jealous of Leah, and she forces the matter of children upon her husband on a lot of different ways. First, she blames her husband, Jacob. "Give me children." In other words, it's your fault. Jacob, it's your fault. Jacob, you need to give me children like you gave her children. Give me children or else I die. And then she comes up with a different plan here. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and Jacob said, this is how Jacob responded. After Rachel said, "Give me children or I'm going to die," he said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Remember that. We're going to come back to that. Jacob reminds Rachel, hey, it's not me that blesses. That's a work of God. Am I in the place of God? In other words, what he was saying to her, this was a little subtle hint here. When somebody, guy or girl, when somebody is that mad, you can only do a subtle hint as the best you can do. He's given a subtle hint saying, you're actually mad with God, not with me. It's not my fault. Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Then she said, well, here's my servant Bilhah. Go in unto her that she may give birth on my behalf. So, big mistake here. First, Rachel is furiously jealous. She blames Jacob, and then she uses her handmaid Bilhah as her surrogate mother. And her handmaid Bilhah conceives one son and another son, and she names those sons. First one is named Dan, means to vindicate, saying, God has vindicated me. Doesn't sound like she's quite really happy about that. The next one, Naphtali, meaning wrestling. Oh, she's fighting a battle right now. Now, we have to understand what's going on here. There was family politics at play left and right. This is a war of propaganda right here. Their family dynamic was completely skewed, and they were bitter at each other. Well, mainly Rachel was bitter. She was trying to do everything she can. She was convinced she was the one that needed to be blessed, and she was jealous of Rachel's blessing, so she blames Jacob. She uses her handmaid as a surrogate. She names the sons, not really good stuff, showing that she's not really healed. Rachel is on a mission in this passage. Rachel is trying to one-up Leah. There's a war going on here, a battle. Now, look at verse 9. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children. Why? Why did Leah stop bearing children? Tuck that away. We'll come back to that. But there's a point. After Rachel's handmaid, Bilhah, had 2 children, Leah realized she's not going to have any more right now. Leah saw she'd ceased having children. She took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob. Oh boy. Fight fire with fire, right? Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Leah said, good fortune has come. So she called his name Gad, meaning good fortune. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Happy am I, called his name Asher, meaning happy. What are we going to do? They didn't need to have a family reunion for sparks to fly. This is just the way their home was. Everyone's trying to one-up each other. Every name was a jab at the other person. Passive-aggressive stuff all over. Tension in the family. There's hidden meaning everywhere. Propaganda war. Then we have this odd passage in verse 14. Look at 14 of chapter 30. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. What's a mandrake? A mandrake is a plant that is in the same family of plants, would be like an eggplant or a pepper. It's a plant that grows, but here's the thing, okay? Glad the kids are out. This plant was known in ancient times to be what's called an aphrodisiac. Now, an aphrodisiac is something that when you consume it, it has an effect on you and it increases your hormones, so you would be more likely to put yourself in a situation where a baby would be created. So this plant was known to stimulate someone in such a way where they would be more likely to produce a child. That's called an aphrodisiac. Well, what do you think Rachel's saying? She's barren right now. She sees Reuben coming with mandrakes. Hey, those have a side effect. I can't conceive. I'm really tried having given my husband, my handmaid, really not happy with those. That didn't work out. There's still that itch there. She's still at war. Hey, why don't you give me some of those mandrakes? That's going to be that's going to solve my problem. That's the next thing she's trying to do. Let's continue in verse 14. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, it is a small matter. She said, is it a small matter that you have what? Taken away my husband. Question, why did Leah stop conceiving? Rachel said, Jacob, you're not allowed to lay with her again. Rachel cut her off. That's why. You see, Rachel is not filled with the Spirit in this passage at all. She's viciously angry. She's desperate. She's willing to do anything. She's cut Leah off. And that's when Leah says, "You've already taken him away from me." That's why she stopped conceiving. Now you're going to take away my son's mandrakes also? Rachel said, they strike a deal. Here's what it is. That he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. They strike a deal. This tension is still going on. Rachel wants the mandrakes, hoping that it would help her to conceive a child. Leah just wants her husband, saying, "Hey, how about giving me my husband? He's my husband too, you know. We didn't ask to be put in this situation. Why don't you give him to me for one night, just tonight only, and then you can have the mandrakes." So they make a deal. Rachel and Leah make a deal. Mandrakes for one night with Jacob. So Leah can have Jacob for one night. And Leah conceives a fifth son in that one night. Now, put yourself in Rachel's point of view. Hey, all right, I really want children. Bad, desperate, furious. These mandrakes look like they might be the answer. They can help me conceive. And you just want him for one night? Okay, probably not going to get pregnant after one night. Here, have one night. Well, guess what? She did get pregnant, and it's another boy. How do you think Rachel feels about this? Not good. Rachel comes to the breaking point right here. She comes to the absolute breaking point. And apparently what happens is she actually gives up. Because look what happens. When Jacob came in from the field, verse 16, when Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." In other words, she's saying, "Hey, Jacob, it's okay. I got you for one night." So he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to the husband." So he called her that son's name Issachar. Now look what happened in verse 19. That son that was born from that one night was already born. Verse 19, and Leah conceived again. How? She only bought him for one night, yet she conceives again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah has endowed me with a good endowment. God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him six sons. Score? Leah 6, Rachel 0. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Score? Leah 7. Rachel 0. You see, Leah was able to conceive two more because there was a time when Rachel had to admit that there was nothing she could do to manipulate God's blessing in her life. There was nothing she could do. She tried everything and nothing worked. You see, Rachel was too much like Jacob, who tried to manipulate every single circumstance. Rachel lived in a broken family. She was jealous of Leah, and she mobilized every resource she had to try to sway the family politics in her favor, until finally Rachel gave up on jealousy. She gave up on surrogates. She gave up on obstruction, on cutting in. She gave up on aphrodisiacs. And it was only after she gave up her jealousy. Look what happened in verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel and listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. God has taken away my reproach. And she calls that son Jacob. But it was not till she had to wave the white flag and realize that she could not manipulate herself into the blessing of God. And she had to realize that God makes no mistakes in giving out blessings. God is right every single time. And sometimes we can bite that bullet ourselves, and we can drink that poison, and we can think that God has made a mistake, but when blessing somebody else, when we're the ones that deserve that blessing. And I want to let you know that this morning, that if you are jealous of someone, you are not mad with that person, you are upset with God. If you are jealous with someone, you are questioning the justness of God. God makes no mistakes. He's right every time. You see, because God is just, you can give up jealousy and enjoy his blessing. It wasn't until Rachel gave up all that manipulation, it wasn't until she gave up her jealousy that she actually experienced the blessing of God. When you give up jealousy, when you stop fighting those little, whether it's in the family or the workplace or whatever tension there is in your life, when you just give up that jealousy, you entrust to God. God, I don't understand what's going on. It doesn't look like they deserve it. I sure feel left out. But you know what, God? I know you are just. I know you. That's a character trait of you. Being just is who you are. You are righteous, and your righteousness outweighs my perspective every time. So you know what? I'm not going to hold on to jealousy. I'm going to let that go, and I'm just going to love you anyway. That's how God will bless you. You see, when you give up jealousy, you're free to enjoy the blessings of life. It frees you to enjoy the blessings of life. But if you hold on to jealousy, the only person you are hurting is yourself. Nobody else. That's how Rachel was finally able to be blessed in this passage. She had to realize everything she tried to do was a failure. The whole time, son number one to Leah, oh, God, I'm pretty sure, I'm the one he loved, I was the one that's supposed to be there. God, I don't know if I need to remind you, but what Laban, my dad, did was wrong. He should have married me. I'm the one that's supposed to get the kid. God, that blessing has the wrong address on it. It should have my address on it. Son number two, God, what are you doing? Why is it that everybody else seems blessed? Son number three, son number four. She's trying everything. She's desperate. Nothing she can do can turn the sway of God's blessing on her. And it's not until she gives up. It's not until she says, all right, God, I've tried everything. I'm just going to give up. And eventually, I'm just going to have to trust you with it, even when I don't understand. That's how she got the blessing of a son. Wasn't until she gave up all the other stuff. So what can we do from this? Because God is just, you can give up jealousy and enjoy his blessing. So what? So trust God for justice. God is just. God is the one who distributes blessings. And God's actions are always just, are always right, because it's who God is. It's in his character. So question is, sounds good, trust God for justice. How do you know you're trusting God for justice? How do you know your jealousy is not creeping in? How do you know you're Rachel in verse 22 when she gives up everything, and not Rachel before that when she's trying to manipulate everything? How do we know the state of her heart is really genuinely trusting God and jealousy's not creeping in for other people? Listen, if you have a social media account today, it's not hard to get jealous. You ever be jealous? Nah, never struggle with that. How do you know you're entrusting justice to God? Well, first, if you trust God for justice and believe that he is doing right, that whoever he chooses to bless with whatever he gifts or positions or salaries or relationships he decides to give somebody or whatever it is that we can get jealous over, if you trust God for justice, catch this, you will never, ever look at another person and be jealous. Ever. Ever. Because God distributes blessings faithfully and justly. You'll never look at somebody else and say, God, you're doing it wrong. Why is that person prospering? Hello? Remember all that work at the church I did that nobody else saw? Remember all the hours in prayer that I've spent this past week and they get blessed and not me? Remember all the donations that I've given? Remember I've served in this class and this, God, only you know the things that I've done for you. Why is that person getting blessed who hasn't done anything? God, why do I feel overlooked? Rachel felt completely overlooked here. Completely overlooked. But you know that you're entrusting, you're resting in the righteousness of God and trusting in Him when you're not jealous of anybody else. You'll never look at somebody else and be jealous. You see, the whole time, Rachel was looking at Leah and saying, what about me? What about me? Where's my kids? Where's my blessings? Everybody else has blessings. What about me? But she could have had the attitude also of, well, they're the last person that needs a blessing. Hey, it could have went, that position at work could have went to anybody else, but not them. Is there contention in your life with anybody else because you believe they have something that they don't deserve? Could be the way they look. Could be something that's out of their control. This was out of Leah's control. That wasn't her doing. Leah didn't ask to be put in that situation, neither did Rachel. We can be jealous sometimes of the way people look, maybe a skill they have, or maybe it's the family relationships that they have, or maybe it's the job title they have, or we can even be jealous of the influence somebody else has. You know, I actually know more about that topic than him. I don't know why everyone's going to them. You can be jealous of other people. We all can get trapped in this. Rachel is not just mad at Leah, she's mad at God because she thinks she's more deserving of the blessing than Leah. But when you trust God and trust that He is just, you'll never wish you were somebody else, ever. You will never covet a gift of somebody else. You will never be overtaken with strife. You won't have to play this family politics propaganda game that's going on here in this passage. No matter how fractured your family is, no matter how it's pasted together, no matter how strong or how weak family relationships are, you'll never get to the point of being jealous when you trust that God is just. In fact, what you'll actually do when you trust that God is righteous and just and every blessing He distributes is the right move, it actually frees you not just to not be jealous, that's a negative really, but it actually frees you to love them, to be happy for them. When you're not jealous with somebody, listen, you will be praying for God to bless others. See, your attitude completely switches here. It all depends. Well, it depends on your relationship with others. Hang on a second. First, it depends on your relationship with God. Do you believe God is just? Do you believe He distributes blessings appropriately? And there may be something that's unbalanced on earth. I'll tell you what, we don't have the same scale as God. He will balance the books, and we can trust Him. So what do? Give up the jealousy. Give up the envy. Give it up. Give it to God. Hand it over to God. Do not be in possession of envy or jealousy in your heart. Now, we have to kind of address almost an elephant in the room. That leads us to the thought of, well, what's the difference between admiring somebody and being jealous of somebody? That's a good question. I mean, there's always going to be people that you look at and that you recognize, hey, there's no doubt that person's blessed. It's okay to admire somebody. So what's the difference between admiring somebody and acknowledging God has blessed that person and admiring that, or being jealous or envious of them? There's a big difference. You see, there will be people that you admire. When you trust that God is just, there'll be people that you admire, but you will not be jealous of them. You'll admire them. Big difference. The difference has to do with love. If you admire somebody, you will acknowledge that there's a blessing, that God is blessing them, and as a result of that, you'll actually be happy for them because you love them. But if you're jealous of somebody, you're going to acknowledge that blessing also, and you're going to not like it. And it will conceive into jealousy, into envy. The difference is there love in your heart? That's the difference. Difference is love. Rachel could have had the attitude, well, Leah, we have an interesting family dynamic here, don't we? It's not a dynamic I asked for. It's not a dynamic you asked for. And God's blessing you with kids and not me. But I just want to let you know, I realize neither one of us have asked to be put in this position. We didn't write this book. I don't know why God has us here, but you're my sister, and I love you, and I'm happy for you. And if you need a babysitter, let me know. Rachel had every opportunity to love her sister, but you don't see that going on in this passage. The absence of love conceives jealousy and envy. Rachel could have loved her own sister. She could have acknowledged her family dynamic was messed up, and she could have acknowledged they didn't have any choice in the matter. And she could have acknowledged, Leah, I was deceived by our dad. You were deceived by our dad. You're just as much of a victim as I am. In reality, they're both victims. They're both victims of their dad's manipulative ways. But I want to rejoice with you that God is blessing you. I'll tell you what, that there should be the attitude of every single believer. If you have experienced the love of God, if you know Christ as your Savior, listen here, if you have experienced the love of God, it doesn't matter what your job situation looks like. It doesn't matter what your family looks like, what your politics is. You are fully equipped with God's love in your heart, how you have received God's love. You're fully equipped to love others the same way. Fully equipped. Well, everyone? I mean, you don't understand. There's a couple people in my family. Everyone? Yeah, everyone. Every single person. Because if you've experienced the love of God, you're fully equipped to love them just as God loves you. There should never be jealousy in the heart of a believer, ever. Our love for others should always cause us to rejoice with them and not be jealous of them. Our love for others should always cause us to rejoice with them. Always. Well, you just don't understand. You don't understand you don't understand this coworker I have. You don't understand this guy. He used to be my friend. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Jesus is preaching on the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is quoting Jesus Christ himself here. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say unto you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, even if that person does everything they can. Maybe they're jealous of you, and you're on the other side of it and you just don't know how to respond. Respond with love. Love your enemies. Love your friends. Love your family. You see, it's through love that everybody knows you're a Christian. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples. Disciple means a follower. If you have love one for another. If you know God's love, there should never be jealousy in our heart. It should instead be turned into an admiration and admiring them and rejoicing with them because of the love we have for them. You know, that's the single greatest tool to soften hearts, is love. It's love. And when you have this kind of love, not only will you not be jealous of people, you'll be for them, you will admire them, you'll want to help them, and you know what else will happen? Your eyes will be opened at how much God has actually blessed you. When you submit to God and recognize He's just, you open yourself up then to receive a blessing from God. That's what's happening here. Remember, then God remembered Rachel and listened to her and opened her womb. Then she got the blessing of a son. When you hold on to envy, when you hold on to jealousy, you are blinded from the blessings not only that you potentially could receive, but catch this, let's be honest today, every one of us, if you're here in this auditorium, you are majorly blessed by God already. Amen? But sometimes we can overlook the blessings God has already put in our life because we're harboring jealousy in our heart. And it's robbing us of the joy, and we don't see what God has already done or is accomplishing in our life right now. But when you give up that jealousy, it opens your eyes to the blessings God has already given you. I'll tell you what, I've never met somebody that was jealous and happy. They don't exist. Nobody's going to be jealous and, I'm jealous, yeah, but I'm happy about it. No. You see, it's not until when you give up jealousy, when you give up like Rachel had to do here, when she finally gave up, then she was free to enjoy the blessings of God. And when you give up jealousy, it breaks you out of a cage. It's like when you harbor jealousy everywhere you go, it doesn't matter what environment you are, you're like in this cage of miserable, solitary confinement. You're going to be grouchy at home, you're grouchy at work, you're grouchy no matter who you talk to, no matter where you are, you're going to always focus on the negative because there's bitter envy and jealousy in your heart, and you are trapping yourself in that cage. And when you put away that jealousy, and when you give that to the Lord, and when you get over that and add more love to your life, it breaks you out of that cage to be free and enjoy the love and blessings of God. That's the life God has for you. That's the life He has for you. Your eyes will be open to how much God has already blessed you. So if you want to be miserable, harbor jealousy, envy. If you want to enjoy the blessing of God, get rid of that. Focus on God who's always just. Don't live your whole life trapped in the cage of your own jealousy. You're locking yourself up if you do that. God has a better life for you. Have you ever thought about it? Rachel was so unloving, she didn't even love her own nephews. That's her sister's children. Nowhere does it say she ever loved them or was a blessing to them. And she was so blinded by, I want my kids, I want my kids. He's giving you nephews. Is that not a joy? Phew. I didn't have my first child till I was like 28. Some of the greatest memories I have before that are playing with my nieces and nephews. One time I took a 5-year-old, my nephew, his name was Gavin. He still is Gavin. It was Gavin. We went to Subway. I'm like, all right, we got to eat. You want to go to eat? All right, where do you want to go? You want to go to Subway? Yeah, sure. I go right up to the cash register. He's at the beginning. I said, no, we're not. No. The cash register is where the cookies are. I said, all right, let me get 20 of the chocolate chip cookies. Subway has the best cookies when they're soft, by the way. And we went out to our car, and we just gorged ourselves, and we had Subway cookies. And then I probably shouldn't have done this, but my little 5-year-old nephew, I looked and said, if your mom asks what we ate for lunch, don't tell her we ate cookies. Just say we went to Subway, okay? He goes, okay. Probably shouldn't have said that. Little confession there. But you know what? Rachel wasn't enjoying any of the blessings that God was giving her because she was harboring jealousy in her heart. And it wasn't until she gave up jealousy that she was free to actually enjoy the blessings of God. Maybe you're here and you're listening and you don't know the love of God. You don't know what we were talking about. It sounds interesting. It's an interesting story, but honestly, you're just kind of lost in it. It's okay. Totally okay. But if you're here and you don't even know, you've never experienced the love of God, that maybe you've heard that God loves you, but you would like to know more about what that means, I'll be here after the service. You can fill out the connection card. We'll get with you this week. I'd love to tell you more about the love of God. But I can tell you a little bit right now. The love of God is that Jesus Christ submitted to the Father and became the conduit of God to declare you righteous and just. That's what the love of God means. It means that because Jesus Christ submitted to God, the will of the Father, he suffered on the cross, died on the cross, shed his blood, buried 3 days, rose again to pay for your sins. You see, Romans 5:6 says, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. Well, it's my first time here. Maybe my second time, maybe my third, or maybe I've been here for a while, but I just don't really know a lot about the whole, what you guys call, I guess it's called gospel. It's okay. Let me ask you this. Do you identify as ungodly? I'll tell you what, because if you identify as ungodly, I have good news for you. Christ died for you. And he died for the ungodly so he can make you godly. That's the love of God right there. He shows his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So if you're ungodly, Jesus Christ died on the cross for you, was buried and rose again. Why? Because he loves you. Because he loves you. What for? So you can have the opportunity to know that your sins are forgiven. How? By faith. Trust in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ alone for the forgiveness of sins. I'll tell you what, if you do not have Christ in your heart, if you've never experienced the love of God, you are so prone to be trapped into the cage of jealousy for your whole life. Don't fall into that trap. Experience the love of God through Christ that can enable you to love others and enjoy the blessings of God. Let's have a word of prayer.